Hello and welcome to World Talks here on TVP World. I'm your host, Marie Kato. As NATO defense ministers met in Brussels, U.S. Defense Secretary Pete Hegseth warned that if Russia's war in Ukraine continues, Washington and its allies will impose costs on Moscow. Speaking alongside NATO Secretary General Mark Rutte, Hegseth urged all members to turn words into action by joining the PURL initiative, a joint effort to supply Ukraine with US-made weapons and ammunition. At the same time, NATO and the European Union are finalizing plans for a drone wall, a new defense layer designed to shield Europe's skies from Russian incursions. To discuss this week's developments, I'm joined by Louis Wierenga, lecturer in international relations at the Baltic Defense College. Good morning and thanks very much for joining us.
Good morning. It's a pleasure to be with you.
So yesterday, Secretary Hegseth said if this war does not end, the US and its allies will impose costs on Russia. What kind of costs are we looking at?
Well, I would imagine that they would be a heavier sanctions package. I think that it's something that's long overdue, but something that would really shut off the gas station, hopefully even going after LNG, because the U.S. has got incredible LNG exporting capabilities, but also continuing to target the shadow fleet. It's been said that the sanctions against the shadow fleet have been working. They've been effective, and that's starting to actually hurt the Russian economy and put them in a very disadvantageous place.
So which NATO members haven't committed to PURL and why? We know that Spain, Italy, France and Britain are hesitant. And what is their reasoning? Do they not agree to peace through strength as a strategy?
Well, I think a lot of it has to do with this being the replacement for the U.S. arms donation to Ukraine, and it requires allies to pay for U.S. weapons deliveries. So Sweden, Estonia, and Finland just pledged further contributions this past Wednesday to increase their spending on purchases of U.S. weapons for Ukraine. But yes, you are right. Some countries are a little bit more hesitant. And I think what this could potentially go back to is this past July and August of this year. Data on Western military aid shows that it plunged by about 43% compared to the first half of the year. And that happened even after some European allies were buying American weapons and then sending them to Ukraine under the prioritized Ukraine requirements list, or the PURL, as you just mentioned. Other countries as well, Denmark, the Netherlands, Sweden, Norway, they've been buying a lot of U.S. weapons and sending them to Ukraine. And I think that the big kind of issue there would just be how that mechanism is set up. I mean, of course, Britain has been a staunch supporter of Ukraine. So I think it's more about the means, not necessarily the reasoning behind it.
Well, 43% as a drop is really quite significant. So what are we looking at in terms of a change in mindset? Obviously, there's that practical impact, but it must signal a change in the attitudes.
Well, I mean, I think that there has been more support for Ukraine as this continues. I mean, everybody understands right now that it is very clear that Moscow is not going to relent on their war of aggression and their area assault against Ukraine. The whole peace deal process, the so-called peace deal process that the Trump administration was leading, was just it was a facade. They continued assaulting the Ukrainian people, civilians, children, the whole time. And there's also a sense of urgency because the big question is what's going to happen in Allied territory. And that came later. That came after the summer, but just after the summer in September. And so I think that there's going to be a lot of focus, the defense ministers meeting the other day in Brussels, about how to spend the money that was allocated at the recent NATO summit in The Hague. And a lot of the change in direction from the U.S. administration vis-a-vis Russia is a clear understanding that it's not working. You cannot deal with Putin this way. Otherwise, you're just going to get more of the same. So there needs to be something swift, decisive, and hard-hitting.
Hegseth praised Germany and Poland for meeting higher defense spending targets. Do you think that following this defense ministers' meeting, do you think that other European allies are now going to follow their lead?
Most of them, and I would hope so. I mean, I think it would be over optimistic to say all of them, but Germany will spend about 10 billion euros in the next couple of years just on different types of drones. And that's coming from the German defense minister, who also said that Germany will offer to take the lead in the EU air defense shield, as well as increasing its contribution to air policing. And you see things like the Dutch and Belgian governments signing a missile defense system agreement, and they're going to use the NASAMS, the Norwegian system. So I think what's probably going to happen. Also, another thing to keep in mind too is the two different types of hardware procurements. There's more of the legacy companies, whether they be American or European, and then there's the new startup with the AI and emerging technologies. And I think that there's a lot of interoperability with these new startups, especially in NATO's northeastern flank, to say, okay, how can we work together instead of how can we compete in order to get everyone what they need to actually defend every inch of Allied territory, which does, of course, include airspace, which we've seen tested quite frequently within the period of a month.
TVP World spoke to top EU diplomat Kaja yesterday in Brussels. She was in Kyiv earlier this week, and she said that if all allies match the EU's level of sanctions and pressure on Russia, the war already could be much closer to ending. Let's take a look at a little part of that interview.
If everybody would do what we have already done when it comes to sanctions and pressure on Russia, I think we would be in a different place. Really, that's why we call on all allies to do the same. We see, for example, that the sanctions on Shadow Fleet are really having a huge effect on Russia. We see their economy is not doing well, their inflation is very high, their national funds are almost completely depleted, and they don't get access to finance. So they are running into a place where they have to make some very difficult choices. So if everybody, all our like-minded partners would do the same, we could really end this war and end this killing.
Do you think that the United States and other partners have been too cautious in their sanctions strategy?
Yeah, I mean, I don't want to point the finger at any one country in particular. I mean, I agree with what Kaja said. I think that that's what should have been done very shortly after 2022. I mean, certainly before then, but definitely after February of 2022, it should have been immediate and apparent that Russia has absolutely crossed the line, attacked the sovereign European nation, and that with the uptick in cyber and hybrid attacks against allied countries, there needs to be a strong message sent. And I think that caution about escalating with Russia, this caution, they understand strength, and that's the only thing that they really understand. And they're going to behave this way towards allied countries, and certainly in an even worse and more horrendous way towards Ukraine, regardless of what happens, unless there is mechanisms in place, unless there are mechanisms in place, like the High Representative mentioned in the clip that you just shown. The world changed. The peace dividend is over. There's really no going back to the status quo. And there are a lot of other things that are changing, like the rapid advancements of technology and how they can be incorporated into the modern militaries and the militaries of the future. And I think that we need to really, to use a hockey analogy, not skate where the puck is, but skate to where the puck is going. And part of that is really reigning in Russia, because it's high time that happens. And more strong measures to keep the economy faltering, to really choke off the gas station, that's needed. If that's the first step of what's needed.
Well, if we're going to work on the back of what you've just said, President Zelensky has said that Ukraine has done its homework ahead of that Friday meeting with Donald Trump, both militarily and economically, and that the U.S. has the power to bring the war to an end. So what kind of specific outcomes or commitments might Ukraine be hoping for from this meeting?
Well, I think that one of the things that's more optimistic going into that meeting that wouldn't have been just a couple of months ago is some type of American security guarantee for Kyiv. There might be some people who would dismiss that prior to Friday's meeting, but I don't think that that's 100% off the table. I think that right now, I mean, of course, there would almost certainly be some economic package to go to that deals between Ukraine and the United States, of course. But I think that there will be that President Zelensky will seek either the U.S. blessing for a backstop for a European peacekeeping force, which is more in line with this current administration's vision for European security architecture and the role of the U.S. in that. But I also think that there could be discussions about an American role in a peacekeeping force, and of course, committing troops with boots on the ground. That may or may not happen, but at least getting the U.S. more involved, and of course, getting more weapons there. And I think it was a very positive sign that Secretary Hegseth has been very proactive in encouraging allies to ramp up investment for the PURL program, which, as I mentioned earlier, that is Americans selling weapons to Europeans and then them donating that to Ukraine. But if Ukraine gets what they need to defend themselves, and then if and when Russia leaves Ukraine, to serve as a real concrete deterrence for something like this being repeated, I think that that'll be the focus of the meeting on Friday.
Just as we wrap up, I want to turn to what we're expecting to happen today, and that is the European Commission is expected to unveil an action plan for a so-called drone wall to protect EU airspace from Russian incursions. What exactly would this drone wall look like in practice, and how quickly are we expecting it to be deployed?
Well, I mean, so I'll start with the first part of the question first. I mean, the specifics around the drone wall are not yet public fully, but the Commission has mentioned that it would consist of a layered network of sensors, EW jammers, or electronic warfare jammers, and connect devices which are positioned across the entire block. And this would be sort of a layered defense system to because what I just mentioned would be a cheaper way to disrupt enemy drone capabilities, like by spoofing or jamming or disrupting their systems. But I think that there will also be some hard power to shoot down, and then there would have to be a sort of political discussion about which type of asset gets shot down or countered with which capabilities. And I think that there's going to be a lot of talk about certain member states who have expressed reservations over how to best tackle drone incursions, even though there's been a lot of fresh investments into air defense. But I think a lot of that is what the role of the Commission versus authorities at the national level are going to be. And I know that this is a Commission question that you asked me, but the Secretary General of NATO has said that there needs to be something like a 400% decrease in air defense spending. And it needs to happen as soon as possible. And time is, of course, always of the essence, but especially now. And I think that there's also going to be measures to talk about how the anti-drone defense systems will not duplicate or overlap with NATO, but also how both entities can work together.
Okay. Louis Wierenga, lecturer in international relations at the Baltic Defense College. Thanks so much for being with us.
Always a pleasure. Have a nice day.
And that's all for this edition of World Talks. Thanks for being with us, and stay tuned for more on TVP World. Goodbye.